Hi, I'm Emily Kamen, J Street's Deputy Director of Jewish Communal Engagement, and I am so excited to be speaking with Rabbi Shira Stutman today. Thank you so much for taking the time. Now, when I approached you about this interview, it was because I was really inspired about some of the innovative work and collaborations I've been hearing about you doing, both through your podcast, Chutzpah, and beyond, bringing together people with diverse views and opinions on Israel and helping to really craft intentional conversations. So before we get to the real questions, we're going to jump ahead quickly, but I wanted to just start with your background. For those who are less familiar with you and your work, can you share more about what you do and how your career has evolved?
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I am a big fan of J Street, and it's important work here in the United States, and God willing, helping overseas in Israel as well. Um, so I'm a rabbi. I graduated from the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College in 2007. And both during my time in rabbinical school, arguably even before that time and after, my work has been to a certain extent the work of holy disruption. I am an entrepreneurial rabbi. So over the course of my career, I've helped to start a number of projects that small synagogues, and Sixth and I is the spiritual center and arts and culture center that I was part of in Washington, D.C. But looking at it from 30,000 feet, what I love to do most is sort of bring the Jewish community together, which of course, thank God, nowadays includes more than just Jews, to bring the Jewish community together to be able to put a voice to our yearnings, to be able to figure out how to build meaningful lives for ourselves and for others.
So taking a step really way back for some perspective, could you just share a little bit about your Jewish upbringing, what that was like, what was most impactful in sort of the formation of your Jewish identity?
Perhaps arguably the most important foundational aspect of my Jewish identity is my name. I was born and I spent my first few years in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, which of course it has a lot of Jews, but it's not like a city like New York City where you can hear a Shira on almost every street corner. In Doylestown, I was always explaining my name. Where did it come from? What was it? And even from the youngest age, my mom would tell you, I love talking about my name. I love talking about Hebrew. I love talking about Israel. And I grew up going to the Charles E. Smith Jewish Day School in Rockville, Maryland, which at that point was, of course, it was a Jewish day school. It was one of the first community schools in the United States, but it was also a very Zionist place because since it was in Maryland, we got all of the Israeli embassy kids in this school. So from day one, I would always say we learned Judaism, but we also learned Zionism as a core orienting principle for what we did. So 5 days a week, I was in my day school, and on Shabbat, I was at synagogue. I grew up at Addis Israel in Washington, D.C. So my family was very involved with the Jewish community and also with Israel.
So I wonder if you could speak a little bit about your then journey from that experience growing up to the rabbinate. When was it that you decided to become a rabbi? Was it sort of like this process, or like a moment for you?
I know all of my pastor friends, they were always like, tell me about the moment of calling. And I was like, yeah, that's not exactly. I was like, I grew up, I love Judaism. I love people, right? And I believe in the power of religion when done well to be transformative. And so I graduated from college, and my mother had always hawked me my whole life that I had to get a graduate degree. Like whatever I was going to do, I had to get the degree in it. Okay. So I basically had two options. I was going to get a PhD or I was going to become a rabbi. I'm one of the first generation of American Jews who grew up with female rabbis. So I had a female rabbi, Avis Miller, from as long as I can remember. So the idea of like women becoming rabbis was not surprising to me. So it was PhD at rabbinical school. It was not really even a decision. The idea of me sitting on my tuchus and writing a dissertation, that's no one's idea of a good time. And so rabbinical school it was.
And you have had really a truly impactful career as really a high profile innovator and leader in creating communities and synagogues and Jewish institutions. What has that been like for you? And what in all of the amazing things you have done, what has been most meaningful?
I want to answer that question on two levels, right? There's like the level writ small, meaning the one-to-one relationships that have been transformative, not just for not that have been transformative, not just like for the person that I'm interacting with, but for me, the funerals, the weddings, the adult b'nai mitzvah, the conversions, like the knowledge. I have somehow been privileged to be a part of the trajectory of someone's life. It doesn't ever get old. So, there are the small moments, and then there are the large moments, like being able to have been a small part of helping to build Sixth and I over the years, which gets 80,000 visits a year now, being a part of helping to do a lot of next generation philanthropy through the federation system with young people in their 20s and 30s who recognize that they're going to have tremendous resources and therefore influence, and want to take the time to actually think about what kind of philanthropist they want to be. Like, I am so lucky. So much of my career has been luck. I don't want to pretend it's any different, but every single day when I get up, I am grateful to be able to, no, that's a lie. Almost every single day when I get up, I am grateful to be able to do the work that I do.
You talked a little bit about your relationship to Israel growing up and sort of the roots and foundation of that. How would you describe your relationship with Israel today?
It's actually quite easy. Israel is my favorite place on earth. Israel is where I can breathe, unlike any other place in the world. Israel is a place where I feel at home. That Israel has been created in my lifetime, I think, is one of the greatest gifts and blessings of my existence. Mm. One of the most painful moments of my rabbinate came when I gave a sermon about Israel that was highly critical of the evictions from Shira. The irony is that the sermon was about how much I love Israel and how hard it is for me to see some of what's happening. And the critique was 4 sentences of the 20-minute sermon. Most of the sermon was about my love. Those 4 sentences got a lot of play. And someone called me and they said, "How are you holding up?" It was a donor type person. And I said, "You know what? All I want to do right now is make Aliyah, move to Israel, and fight the occupation." Right? Just like, now I know that last phrase is already, blood pressure is going up. And they said, "Wait, you want to move to Israel?" And I said, "Wait, why are you surprised?" And they didn't say anything. And I said, "Oh, you think I hate Israel?" And they said, "Yeah, I think you hate Israel." And I said, "Why would I put my entire career on the line if I hated Israel? I love Israel, right? A small turn in my own life trajectory, I would be living in Israel and have raised a family in Israel. I still have said to my children, not only would it be a deep honor and privilege if they made Aliyah, and I would love nothing more, but that if they decided to join the IDF, I would be proud of them. It's not that I hate Israel. I might express my love in a different way, but I love Israel.
Can you share just a little bit more about some of the programs and the conversations you've crafted around Israel over the last couple of years, or whatever, kind of time you want to talk about? What was sort of your impetus and your hopes and aspirations in creating these programs and conversations and opportunities?
I/we. I'm going to use I pronouns only because I don't want to implicate anyone who doesn't want to be implicated in this conversation. But I do want to say out loud that nothing I've done alone. So if you're one of those people I've worked with, you're welcome to say your name. But I/we started to create conversations around talking about Israel. I was trained by resetting the table. But again, anything I've created, if they want to take credit for it, they totally should. And if they don't, that's fine. I've made all my own mistakes on my own. So I started to help create lots of conversations with people across political opinions on Israel. Now, I want to be very clear about some of these conversations. Many of the first ones actually were only with people who were in conversation across the left, because those were the people I was already hanging out with. But it turns out when you have a non-Zionist in a room with someone who is an APAC, a left-wing APAC attendee or a J Street person, there's a lot of diversity of opinion there. And so the way that we went about doing it was not just putting people in conversation with each other, but doing it a sort of very Jewish way where they were in conversation with each other across text. So there was always a third partner in the conversation, and it would be traditional Jewish texts on Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. It would be contemporary texts by people like Peter Beinart or Danny Gordis. The joke that we had in some of these classes is that if you got through the whole series without wanting to throw your computer across the room when you were reading something by someone, then something was wrong, right? Like you had to get to a place. And I didn't use anyone that I consider extreme. Perhaps already two of the people I've mentioned, some people will consider them extreme, but the idea was to have a conversation through the lens of text, not necessarily through the lens of what was happening in the news today, because that often in my experience didn't lead to thoughtful, reflective conversation, because we were in the fact that Israel was getting bombed today. I mean, it is getting bombed today as we record, did not allow for people to be as reflective because they were in a fear-based mindset, even more than typical. The second part of my work began to be with people in more typical, traditional, conservative synagogues, as it were. And what was interesting about the second part is that the first part of my work was not intergenerational. It was people who were millennials and Gen Z, which was a lot of the work that I was doing at that time. The second part of my work was not only across a political spectrum, but it was also across a generational spectrum as well, which was actually new for me. I remember the first day of the first class, I made an Andy Cohen reference, and I realized that like half the class had no idea who Andy Cohen was, right? Because I had just come from a place where like everyone knew who Andy Cohen was. So, I had to make some adjustments myself. But that actually led to a whole other layer of conversation, because in the room, you had people who had lived through 48. You had people who had lived through 67 and 73 and everything. And then you had people for whom the occupation was the only thing they knew. They didn't know Israel not as an occupying force. They didn't know Israel not as a type of military powerhouse. And so you were able to start to hear stories. And one of the ways that we used these stories was we had everyone write a case study. They wrote a reflection it was a little bit on their own Israel experience, but it was mostly about something they were struggling with. There was a moment of seeing each other and seeing where we are same, even in the midst of our differences. And that was like, you talk about the privileges of getting to be a rabbi or getting to be a facilitator. There's nothing better than that. Where I really can change people is in being able to hear and hold other people's opinions in the hopes that we can help people recognize that there actually are different ways to love Israel.
What role do you think and feel Jewish Americans should play as a community that has an interest in Israel's success, both as a Jewish and democratic state?
I think that American Jews have a very important role to play in how the American government approaches Israel, because we are paying taxes to the American government, number one. So that is one place that we should place our influence, which is why organizations like J Street are so important. And I think that American Jews have a lot of responsibility for how we talk about Israel as an American community. Also, I need to stand up and stand tall and be an ally and an accomplice to the people working on the ground in Israel to make change.
We are really honestly so grateful that you are a member of J Street's Rabbinic and Cantorial Cabinet. And I would just love to know more about, what was it that led you to lend your name and support to J Street and the cause and the work that we do here?
I don't know if it was ever a question for me. Like by the time J Street started, I remember the first email that Rabbi David Teutsch put on the Reconstructionist Rabbis listserv about this new organization that he was helping to start. And I was like, oh yeah, no, that makes sense, right? I was a big APAC person for many, many, many years, and APAC could have broken a different way. And I respect the choices. I might not agree with them, but I respect the choices to go one way rather than another. I guess there is a part of me that still wishes we could have, you know, one pro-Israel lobby, but the Jews don't have one of anything. We don't have one denomination. We don't have one, like, what, we don't have one way of keeping kosher. We don't like, and the fact that we could have one voice on Israel just no longer felt true or fair. We need a fuller range of voices talking about what Israel policy could look like, because it's good for Zionists and it's good for representatives who want to support people who support Israel in making the most long-lasting change.
For those that are interested in learning more about you, about your work, where can they find more information? Where can they connect with you?
They can find me on all of the social medias, and the consultancy that I run right now is called Mixed Multitudes. After the Erev Rav, the mixed multitudes that came out of Egypt after slavery. So mixedmultitudes.net. But the truth is, stutman@gmail.com. I'm happy to talk to anyone. Supporting Israel as a proud Zionist is part of my life's work, and I want to be a proselytizer for it as much as possible.
I love it. Thank you. I have really absolutely loved talking with you today.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time. For those who want to learn more about J Street or get involved, please visit us at jstreet.org. And thank you again.
Oh, Emily, it was really my privilege. Thank you for your important work.